everybody. Welcome to the Circle of Brilliance. This is T. Falcon Napier. Today we are going to finish up our discussion about goal setting on the change grid. Specifically, we're looking at different areas of the change grid, and we're getting clarity in our thinking around what happens in each of these locations energetically, and then in turn, what sorts of goals might come from that sort of an energy. And we did this because as we started to explore different wheels of life and other basic goal setting sorts of screening tools, we just felt they were incomplete. And what better way to make things complete than to go, well, does it overlay on the change grid? And so that's what we're doing here. Now, again, as I mentioned on the last call, I have no intention of ever making this an actual layer on the change grid. So if you run a ChangeWorks report or anything like that, you're not going to see this layer. And certainly I see no reason to share this with a client ever. More than anything, it's just a tool for us as the professional community, as the Circle of Brilliance, to kind of look at the change grid in a different sort of way and saying, well, what can we do with our understanding of the change grid and how things map out to address a very common kind of a question? And again, that is, where do goals come from? What kind of goals arise from where? Now, in our previous calls, we've talked about the things that are happening as far as out-grid energy goes and the goals that might come up from that. And we talked about the in-grid energies. And last time around, we talked about the up-grid energies. And that leaves us only with the down-grid energies and the ones in the middle. And so to kind of get the ball rolling, let me remind you all that the down-grid energy has two primary characteristics. The first characteristic has to do with one's perceived ability to do something. So to be down-grid, what do you have to perceive your level of ability to be?
Hi.
Pretty high. And to be down-grid, you also have to have a certain perception of the challenge or difficulty that things are representing to you. So how challenging or difficult do we find things that are down-grid? A lot of
Not
not
challenging.
yeah, not particularly. So 6 or lower if we want to be precise about the whole thing, and ability is 6 or higher. And so I want you to kind of get yourself into that energy. Now we call that quadrant the analytical energy tends to live there. The thing the analytical energy wants more than anything else is to know something, to understand something. And so it's all about being able to wrap our head around information, around processes, procedures, approaches, anything that can get formalized, documented. It just lives energetically down-grid. And so when you think about our personal lives and you think about the kinds of things that we are called upon to do that benefit from us wrapping our head around knowledge and skill and experience and policies and procedures and techniques and routines and habits and blah, blah, blah. These are all the things that would end up plopping down grid. And so as I looked at all these other models of goal setting and all the little life categories they came up with, I did my best to plop them someplace on the change grid that I thought would make sense. And so here are the ones that ended up down grid. So we'll start with education and personal development in wedge little 9 right here. I think you guys can all see what I'm showing. Um, now that should not be surprising because we did say that the down-grid quadrant is all about knowing something. But when I think about education and personal development, I want to add something to that. And these would be the goals that have to do with educating ourselves with an intention in mind. So we're learning whatever we're trying to learn because we need to have that training, that understanding, that whatever, in order to do something that's actually more out-grid. So in order for me to be the best leader, in order for me to have the greatest level of achievement and accomplishment, in order for me to achieve financial well-being, I may very well need to educate myself in some formal or just, what do I say, consumer sort of level so that I know what's going on and I can do a better job of doing these out-grid sorts of things. So sometimes education is pursued as a means to an end. Well, in the purity of the down-grid energy, education is pursued for its own sake. So knowledge in and of itself is a good thing to have. And the pursuit of knowledge is a noble pursuit in and of itself. And so that's why I also put personal development, personal growth, those kinds of things here. Nevertheless, regardless of what your reason is for gathering the education, this is still where there is a lot of energy being put into knowing something, learning something, etc. Any thoughts you guys want to throw in here about education? Jane, I see you have your hand up.
Well, in my experience, education, I agree with. Personal development, I think, frequently takes a lot of courage and stepping out of one's comfort zone. So
Mm-hmm,
I'm
mm-hmm.
not sure if I think that would be an analytical. I think the challenge is often fairly high and the ability not as high, where you're trying to create new habits and stuff like that.
Sure. And so let's take a look at that. If the energy, well, certainly because it's education, we'll say somewhere in it there's an analytical element. But what would the other energy be that you think would be motivating someone to pursue education?
Well, and I don't necessarily think of education as, I mean, personal development, I think, may have a component of education in it, but I think of personal development more as experiential. And, it's not just sitting down reading a book, because that's
Right,
great to
right.
learn, what you should do, but it takes a lot of, um, a lot of trying things and, like maybe speaking up when you're uncomfortable or
Mm-hmm,
something like that,
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
where you may feel a low level of, you may feel a really high level of challenge and a lower level of ability.
But you're
So,
displaying some sort of courage in that moment to
yeah,
actually
I
speak
mean,
up and share
you're
whatever's
really
going
stepping
on.
out of your comfort. Most personal development, I think, is stepping out of your comfort zone and doing something different than you
Mm-hmm.
normally do.
Okay.
The idea that, if I'm keep doing the same thing I'm doing, I'm going to get the same result. So if I want a different result, I need to do something different.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
And it's really, that's one reason it's so challenging to, build habits, break habits,
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
stuff like that.
Right, good. Now I have a couple of things I'll add to the discussion, but we got a lot of other people that are unmuted. So you guys have anything you want to add to what Jane has just put forth?
This is
I
Kathy.
think
I
what
really
Yeah.
like what Jane said. I really like what Jane said, because I think that's real. I think there's less passivity with a person. I mean, I don't mean to think that education is passive, but there is a tremendous amount of energy and commitment that goes into personal development. So,
Okay. So
you know,
I'm hearing this word. I'm hearing commitment. I'm hearing confidence.
yeah,
I'm hearing experience. Okay, good, good, good.
Yeah.
I
Brian?
also think the when Jane was just talking, what came to mind to me was what's the guy that did the hero's journey?
Mm,
Was it Joseph Campbell or
Oh,
something?
Joseph Campbell. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah,
yeah,
because the hero's journey starts with this idea of being courageous in terms of answering the call. Like there's
Mhm,
some kind of, I think the terminology he used was a future pull. And
yes,
so that gives
Mhm.
you that courage to take that, to start that journey. And you're going to go through a series of thresholds, but you first answer the call.
mhm, mhm, mhm. Okay, other things you guys want to throw in before I toss in my 2 cents? Anybody? Bunch you on the call. Feel free to chime in as always. Let's see someone just scooted up.
And I would put personal development and leadership development sort of in the same category, because I think personal development is the foundation of leadership. It's
Okay.
the cornerstone. It's the self-awareness, self-management cornerstone of leadership development.
Okay. And I'm more than happy to move that there in just a second. Let me throw just a couple of things out to you guys. Everything that I've heard you say is giving me evidence of a particular energy. Now, we already said analytical, we'll put aside for a second. So that gives you three remaining. So when you think about personal development, is personal development more about an amiable energy, an expressive energy, or a driver energy?
I think it's a driver energy.
Because you were talking about confidence, you were talking about commitment, you were talking about experiences, you were talking about putting yourself into a bit of an uncomfortable situation so that you can rise
Courage.
to that. Mhm.
Courage.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And by
courage.
the way, even moving it into the place where leadership is, moves it even more so into the driver primary energy. Well, right now where I've positioned it where there is a balance between the driver energy and the analytical energy. And keep in mind that in order for ability to be high, ability has 4 component elements to it. So anyone remember what the 4 elements are that when blended together gives rise to your level of ability to do something? Ability is made up of what?
Resources,
Resources is number 4. Yep.
time,
Mm,
not time, resources. No,
okay. Okay.
no,
So here goes.
no how.
Your ability is made of your level of knowledge,
Yeah,
skill,
Skills and experience.
and core physical resources. So certainly when we say knowledge, that resonates with education. When we talk about skill, that's education that's been applied to something. So now it becomes a little bit more, I want to say practical. So we develop an ability to do something. I didn't want to use the word ability. We develop some acumen about applying that ability in a particular situation, and from that skills arise. So one is about education is about learning how to do it, and the skill is about doing it often enough that you have some sort of fluency to it. And then we go, well, there's also got to be experience. And experience says that not everything is predictable. And so it's not enough that you can just have the evidence of skill. Do you have sufficient skill so that when things get thrown into the equation that change it in some slight or profound way, you can still apply that knowledge and apply that skill and walk away with a positive outcome? And so that comes from having lots of experience, applying your knowledge and your skill to a variety of situations. And then obviously the last one is about resources. You have to have enough of the core physical resources to make something possible. In fact, then we don't talk about so much about ability as much as possibility. Because if I don't have any of the key resources, then is my ability really in question anymore? Or is it really just more about it's not possible I don't have any of the resources that are necessary? And so when we talk about experience being what personal development is really all about, it still resonates with a strong perceived level of ability going into it. Now, going to Brian's illustration, he said that there has to be some sort of a calling. How did you
Yeah.
phrase that? All right.
Yes, answering the call. And I think about that word development itself. I don't remember the word, but I remember in Latin, the root word for development shares the same connotation as an envelope. So again, it's something that you open up to.
And put things in.
Right. So there's
Yeah, it's
literally a
got all those elements.
curiosity, like a deep
Right.
curiosity of some sort.
Yeah, and so I'd like to apply just a little bit of a spiral dynamic to this layer, the change grid or the change grid period. When we talk about someone having a calling, we are looking at an in-grid situation moving into a more up-grid situation. So keep in mind, if I brought up the levels of engagement on the far left side of the change grid, we have people that are pre-aware or are becoming aware. And certainly for this dynamic to occur, we first have to become aware of something. That awareness pulls us into an upgrade sort of a mindset because a challenge now presents itself and we have to rise to that occasion in order to address that challenge. But we're still in that awareness kind of mode. Nevertheless, energetically, we have a vision. We want to make that contribution. We want to be able to provide and protect, and there's definitely an adventure afoot. Well, as we start to work with whatever that situation is and our ability starts to increase, that is our knowledge, our skill, our experience, tapping into those key resources, we move around this. And now we start to develop and display those leadership qualities, and we accomplish whatever we set out to accomplish. And maybe when I put personal development here, I should have put it into the past tense, that just like the education has been gained here, so has the personal development targeted outcome has been
Mm.
achieved. Because when I think of the act of getting an education, it is certainly not this far down grid. So the act of going to college and getting the most out of that education is a more upgrade commitment, because there is more of an unknown that's in play, and that. But as you achieve those levels of understanding, as you graduate in those levels of education, as you become certified, etc., I would like to think that your education and your personal development is something that you can turn to without experience any kind of stress, that it's there as part of the essential you. So perhaps the pursuit of education is somewhere else on the change grid. The pursuit of personal development might be somewhere else on the change grid, but when it's in place, I just wanted to put it energetically between the analytical quadrant and the driver quadrant in a balanced place. So here, by the way, you'd either be a driven analytical. In fact, you'd be a driven analytical, or you would be an analytical driver to have it placed here. So does that resonate with anybody?
Yes.
Yes.
Well, I mean, if you're, oh, yeah, it's totally how you're looking at it, because personal development, or the desire to do personal development, starts with awareness. So the way that you described the first cycle of you were saying it with the calling,
Yeah.
that's sort of the cycle of personal development. You notice, and you first become aware that there's a gap there. You set a vision for the future, how you want to be, and
Mhm.
practice, and gradually become more masterful, develop those leadership
Yes.
characteristics,
Yep.
or
Yep.
personal mastery, or whatever. And
Mhm.
then I would say, you would eventually move down toward mastery.
Sure.
But
And then hopefully you'd find another purpose to take the
well, yeah,
cycle
that's
around
why
again
I
and
think
again.
that personal development doesn't ever really end.
Well, and honestly, when I first saw personal development, I wanted to put it in the exact center of the change grid, or that first ring outside of that exact center, because I think that personal development could happen most places on the change grid. I don't know there's all that much personal development super far down grid, because you kind of like feel like you're done with it, you're developed. But when I think about being presented with an upgrade situation, I think that there's opportunity for development and growth to occur there, and certainly
Mhm.
outgrid. But again, we could make the core distinction that these upgrade opportunities for development are probably being driven by some sort of an external factor, and the outgrid opportunities for development are being driven more by internal sorts of factors, choice. Yeah. So for a while, I didn't even want development to be put there at all. But for the sake of putting it someplace, that felt like the best place I could
Maybe it's, well, I was going to say maybe it's personal growth. I was just looking for a different, but that's the same thing.
Yeah. And
Um,
so I like to think that some of the, and again, it's not a layer of the change grid. It really is just, I want to just say, hey, let's see if we can just put ourselves into these 25 different energetic states and ask ourselves what kinds of goals might actually arise from being in that place on the change grid. Because, talking about personal development, my conflict with it being here is that would also put it where power apathy is. And power apathy sounds like this: I know I need to do something, I just wish somebody else would do it. Well, how are you growing personally if you're delegating stuff to other people? You know, if anything, you're giving the developmental experience to somebody else. So
Yeah.
as we
Yeah,
talk
I
about
know.
this more and more, how come I can't isolate this to, oh, because I'm looking at a PDF or screenshot. Okay, yeah, I should have opened this up in the PowerPoint so I could go ahead and change that, but I'll make a note to either just separate it all together. Because again, I think it really is something that happens most places on the change grid. Because isn't that what life is all about? Is there life without development?
Well, I mean,
Existence.
one example would be you're down in apathy and you realize that, wow, I'm really bored. I'm just really tired of what I'm doing. And it's that, and if it's to be, it's up to me. And that immediate awareness would then say, okay, what steps do I need to get out of this? And that would
Sure.
take you up and out. And
Absolutely.
that is an awareness that, and that would be internal and
Right,
it's
and
not,
that awareness could certainly occur, but
yeah.
if we look at where we actually put depression on the change grid, this is depression that is going unrecognized.
Mm.
Because again, it's in very low levels of awareness. It's in hypo awareness. And so, but you are absolutely right. The moment someone becomes aware that they are depressed, that they are bored, that they are whatever, and in that moment, they also choose to do something about it. They're applying their own upgrade maneuvers and their own outgrid maneuvers to make that all happen. So it's that awareness that whatever they're experiencing is not should not be under the radar, this should not be on the back burner. They need to become more aware of it before they'll even do anything about it at all. So, yeah, yeah,
Without the lack of awareness, or the, I should say, with the lack of awareness, where education and personal development is right now, would that like a trap be this? I call it a credentialing trap. It's like
yeah,
the
yeah, yeah.
people who get, the
Yeah.
education, but then you're not applying it to anything.
Oh yeah, this
Right.
is very commonly found here. And that's why I also said there's a lot of people that are out there collecting what they call personal development experiences, but that doesn't mean they mobilize any of it to do anything. So it's kind of like this collection of credentials, this collection of certifications that are never actually deployed in any kind of an outgrid sort of a way. So that's why it's like it does happen here, but I like the idea that, well, personal development in a more positive frame can happen many, many places all around the change grid because isn't life personal development? So,
Mm-hmm.
so I'm kind of I'm with that, but yeah. So yeah, it just ended up falling there because I thought that even if I am on a conscious path for personal development, even that thought process involves some sort of driver energy because I am on a path and I am pursuing something. Um, and it has to have an analytical element because I chose something to pursue. So, but I didn't win like, well, does it go where financial well-being goes? Does it go, is it in between? I don't know. So that's just where it landed. Um, okay. So it may not be perfect, but that's where it ended up plopping. At least for now, I'm happy to move it. And again, I'm happy to remove the personal development aspect from it altogether. Um, okay. Any other thoughts, comments about wedge little 9 right here? No? Okay. Now we go further down grid. Health, wellness, fitness, self-care. Now, again, for people that have their head wrapped around this, um, they do tend to view their ability to achieve health, to achieve wellness, to achieve fitness intellectually. People go like, "Oh no, I have the ability to do it." And truth be told, the things that I would need to do in order to become more healthy, in order to become more well, more fit, or have better self-care are not all that difficult. They actually are really quite straightforward, but I don't get them done. I don't get them
Mhm.
done because I don't have enough productive tension around getting them done. So if I said that the actual goal is to increase my wellness, is to increase my fitness, is to increase my health and self-care, I promise you that growth is not going to occur down grid. But that's a
Mhm.
different that's an activity now that's on the grid, achieving health, achieving wellness, achieving fitness, or achieving personal development, or achieving whatever. That's a different verb. This is just saying when it comes to someone being healthy, when it comes to them being well, when it comes to them being fit, um, energetically, we don't have a lot of energy around those things. And those of you with a medical background, you know this, wellness is a very tough sell.
Mhm.
So fixing illness is an easy sale, and people will hand over big bucks in order to escape illness. But the
Mhm.
thought that they could achieve wellness for really next to nothing because of a lot of lifestyle changes that would help things dramatically, for whatever reason, there's no tension around it, and so they don't do anything really around it.
Yeah.
um, so that's why I just said, but when I talk about health and wellness and fitness, these goals do require a significant amount of analysis, of understanding, of knowledge, in order for someone to live in a healthy way, to understand wellness and fitness and self-care. There is a level of knowledge that needs to be present for those goals to, or for those activities to happen, or those outcomes to exist. Yeah.
Yes, I like that there because to me, in terms of the health and wellness, fitness, self-care, there's a natural aspect to it once you get that awareness. Because I like think about, in fighting with patients all the time, no one wakes up in the morning and say, oh, today would be a great day to be sick.
Yeah. Yeah. Yep, 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 yep,
But
yep,
when
yep,
you
yep.
try to get them towards more wellness and talk about habits and those kinds of things, then there's a
Mhm.
fight.
Yeah.
And I call it the ultimate acts against self,
Hmm, hmm.
because I know there's a mental model and narrative behind the diagnosis that they're actually experiencing. And that's what I'm trying to help them in. That's what I
That's
wanted to
right.
use the change grid
That's right.
for.
Hmm.
But they're just not aware of that mental model or that narrative that's holding them back.
Exactly. Well, and even if you think about a lot of things, particularly in the area of fitness, health as well, look at the upgrade maneuvers. In order to keep ourselves upgraded, we have to constantly increase the standards against which we're measuring our performance or our result, or this our level of satisfaction with our result. So I'm very much into weight training. Like, it's called progressive resistance for a reason. So you have to move it more times. You have to do that. Otherwise, you're going to plateau somewhere. And one of the big jokes in any kind of a gym where there's any kind of serious bodybuilders is that most people who go to the gym and only work out the muscles they can see in a mirror. And so, um, they work out their biceps and they'll work out their shoulders, they'll work out their chest. But usually because their lower body is below the mirror, they don't do anything. And so you see all these guys with very well-developed upper bodies and nothing in the leg department at all. So they look totally out of balance and all this kind of stuff. And so they reach a point where they go like, oh no, I look good enough. I'm well enough. I'm healthy enough. And that word enough is what keeps them down grid. So we have to have these standards to come up, but keep in mind that advancing your health, advancing your wellness, advancing your fitness, advancing health, self-care is a different verb than being healthy, being well. People will assume they're in control and it's going to plot further downgrade for all that.
You
Yeah,
know what, I
yes.
think too, what I used to consider self-sabotage. In fact, I was just doing a program on mind medicine and miracles, and it's the first time Spectrum had a glitch. So we're gonna, it's crazy, but things happen for a reason. But the bottom line is, once we do things on a repeated basis, it becomes a habit. It goes to the subconscious mind.
Yes.
And I think if we don't access things at the root, at the cause, not the condition, we're not going to make a change. And so there are things, there's a tape recorder going on a deeper level of mind that does sabotage us. And that's where
Absolutely.
we have to just focus on conscious choice to
Mhm.
guide and direct and rise above it. So it isn't always, because if you raise tension, a lot of times if you tell people, you know, you're going to die if you don't quit smoking,
Mm.
some will quit because you raise the tension of awareness, all of that. But
Mm.
other people get so stressed out. I've had people that smoke more.
Yeah.
So
Yep,
I
yep, yep.
think until we start rearranging the belief system on a deeper level, we're not going to get the results that you're talking
You're
about.
absolutely right, and that is certainly reinforced by things that we've learned about in neurolinguistic program. Well, even just in the world of weightlifting, I can tell you that um,
Yeah.
we talk about where does growth, where does strength, where does that all come from? Well, it comes from getting your muscles to a point of momentary muscular failure. If your muscles do not fail to do what you're asking them to do, then a vitally important message is never transmitted to your brain. And that vitally important message is we need more strength down here. We need more, you know, size down here. We need more power down here. If you can actually successfully handle the burden that you're giving yourself, your muscles or your brain goes, I guess that's good enough. Now, long
Mhm.
before you would reach momentary muscular failure, any of you have ever done any weight training, you know this, or you've done any endurance training, you know this. The brain gives up long before the body needs to, because the brain doesn't want you to be uncomfortable. The brain doesn't want you to do anything that will in any way take it to a limit. And so your brain is always going like, wait, that's enough. You don't need to do any more. You don't need, but you can do more. And you have to push past that momentary mental failure in order to take yourself to momentary muscular failure. That's where the growth occurs. So I think that that's kind of the same thing about habits take us to a certain level of performance, but and habits
Mhm.
also lock us into the belief that that's good enough, you know, because I love it when people go like, well, I go and I walk my 5,000 steps every day. Well, I'm glad you do that. That's very nice. But don't think that that's improving your situation. It might be stopping it from getting worse. And I'm not going to discourage you from doing your 5,000 steps a day, but that's not exactly increasing your cardiovascular health or, you know, anything else that goes along with that. So comments about that?
Yeah, I used to hear this from patients all the time when they'll say, like, they'll get frustrated when they hear all that's going on and, you know, start exploring possibilities. And they would say this comment, I'm doing my best. And I said,
Hmm.
okay, but I'm not challenging your best, and best isn't finality.
Right.
So perhaps you need a new best, or
That's
we
right.
can reframe the best. But there's no doubt you're doing your best, but is there something better?
Yep. We must always entertain a healthy dissatisfaction for things the way they are. So that applies. That came from our management program where I said a manager's job is to entertain a healthy dissatisfaction for everything the way it is. So if your manager ever says, if your manager ever says to the owner of the company, I'm satisfied with our team's performance, then I need a new manager. But the operative word there is healthy dissatisfaction, the belief that we can always do better. Okay, let me go ahead and go around this because by the end of this, I have an exercise for you guys. So let me kind of take this around now. Number 12 is where mastery would actually be. And so we said the goal in mastery is for you to take something that you're interested in, you're passionate around, and really taking your level of ability to among the best in the field. So if you have any kind of a goal around really becoming top dog in whatever that area of life happens to be, that skill, that whatever, that's what's really going on here. Now, people who achieve this outcome and stay and stop don't stay in this or owning that outcome for very long. You with me?
Mhm.
So you might be a master in the moment, but if you stop paying attention to the world around you, you stop changing and advancing as things are changing in the world around you, you now have the illusion of mastery. Nevertheless, whether the mastery is true or an illusion, you still operate identically. So you carry yourself and present yourself as someone who's completely mastered whatever it is that we happen to be looking at. Okay, so that's that I think we can all agree upon. Very high levels of ability, relatively low levels of tension are characteristic of mastery. But whenever we see things plotting this far downward, we also know we're looking at untapped potential, and we need to do something to move people up grid. Otherwise, they're just going to end up running on autopilot, and that won't be good in the long run. Okay, coming around the change grid a little bit, we have creative pursuits. So creative pursuits are things that you're doing just to kind of amuse yourself, to let your artistic qualities come forward, whether that's in music or in whatever medium you happen to choose. It's this thing that says for you to really do something creatively, and do it to a level that satisfies you, you probably have to have a decent amount of ability, and you have to have developed enough skill and experience around it that you aren't overwhelmed by the challenge that it represents. That doesn't mean you're not continuing to advance your ability. Maybe you want to take your creative pursuit to a level of mastery. Um, but there you go. I mean, we hope you don't become bored with it. That's kind of the whole goal there. So when I think about creative pursuits, and I'm talking about creative in terms of artistic creativity, creation for the joy of doing it, beauty being the outcome in whatever form it happens to take. I'm not talking about creative problem solving. That's upgrade. This is about a creative pursuit for artistic things. Anyone who is really adept at any kind of a form of art will tell you that in order to achieve greatness in that form of art, there is a very high level of understanding you need to have. So there is a reason why people get degrees, even advanced degrees in fine arts. There's a reason why schools of art and design exist. It's because there is a lot to learn about the formal part of whatever that artistic or creative pursuit may be. And then how you go about applying that knowledge, hopefully, is in some way that is new and innovative and creative. Otherwise, you're just kind of duplicating what everyone else has duplicated. I'll give you an example of this. Architecture is a creative pursuit, but architecture needs to have a very high level of knowledge, skill, and experience behind it. Otherwise, on paper, someone can draw a beautiful, creative, clever, innovative kind of building that's going to do what?
Fall down.
Going to fall down. So we need to have that foundation of ability, knowledge, skill, ability, all those things that contribute to that analytical energy. So even if you're painting, you have to understand that there's rules about painting if you want it to turn out looking right, and you'd like it to be as easy as possible. So who knew? Again, I mentioned to you before that quilting here is in a Sun City community is a mega art form. Well, when we find out the number of hours that these quilters have spent learning the basics, it's pretty astounding. It's a massive commitment to learning about the history of quilting, the techniques of quilting, on and on and on. But they always produce something new and different and beautiful. So is the level of ability high? Yep, some of them have mastered it. Is the level of challenge all that difficult? Not compared to other things, and they're not trying to create an award-winning quilt their first time out. So they're not in the upgrid or outgrid kind of area. They're downgrid around it, but in a good way, in a good way. Okay, thoughts about that? All right, I'll throw one more in then, and that's the other one that's on the border. That has to do with the household environment, quality of life, things that we need to take care of. For us to have a household that functions well, we have to have a reasonable amount of ability. I don't need to have a degree in home ec, but I need to know enough about how to care for myself, how to care for my clothing, how to care for my home, how to care for my garden, how to care for my car, whatever it is, that I can do that. And the things that I'm being asked to do or asking myself to do are not all that particularly difficult individually. So that's what we're talking about for those kinds of things that would fall into that category. If there's no questions, comments about what's happening down grid, I'd like to get to these mid grid ones and then give you guys your exercise. So, okay. If you'll remember, I said at the beginning of the nature of change, I said that the change process involves 3 steps. The first step is that we look at the world around us to determine if we are 4 things. What are those 4 things? Oh,
Safe.
unmute yourself.
Happy, healthy.
No, are we safe, secure, happy, and healthy? So I went like, well, then pursuing safety has to be a category of goals, and pursuing security has to be a category of goals, and happy and healthy. And so as I started looking at what happens as we get closer and closer to the change grid, I realize that's where they overlay. So if you look at all these upgrid kinds of behaviors, a lot of it has to do with about making sure we end up being safe. So staying out of harm's way, providing and protecting, whether it's some social capital, contributing. These all have that little element of boosting our sense of safety. If I look at things like getting a good job and making sure the money's taken care of, and that I'm, showing my leadership because I can take charge of things and run things that need to be run, and I've got some social capital, know how to use it, I've got some education, these elements all contribute to my overall sense of security. If I go in grid now and I look at the goals having to do with taking care of community and my family and my primary relationship and friendships in my home, this all has to do with what brings me kind of happiness at a personal sort of level. So happiness in terms of where I fit into things, my own self-esteem, because how can I be pleased with myself? Where does that all come from? Well, it comes from the relationships that are coming from that amiable side of things. And so we like to think that these things are what are bringing us closer to that vision of happiness. And then we would have said healthy, but I think here's where I want to get into a little bit more about mental health. That when we have a better sense of control around things like our wellness and education, and we have that creativity, these things are all kind of working for us. We are able to have a certain level of contentment. And when I think of commitment, I think about a mental state where I go, things are okay. So I'm pleased, I'm satisfied in this moment. So I would say that healthy is part of it, but content seems to resonate a little bit better. So can you guys kind of feel how these are about safety issues, and these are more about security issues, and these are more about happiness issues, and these are more about those contentment kind of issues? Thoughts about that?
Oh, that makes sense, T.
Yeah, that resonates for me.
Yeah. And so that's why I can say, like, as people get really close to the center of the change grid, I think that their expression of goals might become a little bit more generalized. And they say, well, my goal is to make sure that I'm secure, that things are secure, that I want to be happy. And I go like, well, I could do a deeper dive and say, well, happy has a lot of categories that could contribute to it. Do we want to look at these categories, or do I just want to look at whatever this core element happens to be? The other thing that comes out of this is, I would say to you that the ultimate goal, to be in the middle of the change grid, to have a place of peace and balance and harmony, and a sense of connectedness with spirit within you, outside of you, depending on how you define that role in your life. I wonder if you can actually be there if you feel unsafe, or if you're feeling insecure or unhappy or discontent or unhealthy, if we want to just be about that specific one. it's almost like these things need to be checked off on the major goal is to say, if I've done a decent job of making sure that my concerns around safety, security, happiness, and health are all satisfied, I am now liberating myself energetically to simply be. And that's, to me, is what the center of the change grid is all about. It's about being in the world, but not of it. It's about being able to detach myself from what the needs or demands or concerns of today are, because they've been satisfied. Things are all right now, good enough, well enough, safe enough, secure enough. And because I feel that kind of, what do I say, cushion, we'll go envelope to bring things back to what Brian was saying earlier. There's kind of like a little awareness there that I'm in control, that things are all right. And that's what enables me to take some time and be in that center of the change grid. As I've said on many other calls, we don't want to be there for an unlimited period of time. We go there to renew and recharge and replenish and take a breath so that we can then go, well, all right, I'm recharged now. So let me look, am I actually as safe, as secure, as happy, as healthy as I really want to be? Is there something going on that would benefit from some attention? So let me get out there and live. And as I get out there and live, and I get out there and I do these sorts of things, it should all help me to come back to this balanced, centered sort of place. So everybody have a wonderful Thanksgiving, such as it will be. I'm sure we have plenty of things to be thankful for, even as
Yes.
bizarre as 2020 has been.
Yes.
Okay, count your blessings. Bye, everybody. Bye.
Bye.
Take care.
All right.